How are you?
Good.
Nice. And hello, DJ. And hello, Dao.
Cool. Folks are coming. We.
Hello, Venkata.
Hi there.
Maybe we can wait for 2 more minutes for more
Sure.
folks to come.
Hello, Sammy.
まもなく池袋、オレンジは左側です。
Haka, that's a really cool background. Are you on the train and are you at the Ikebukuro station? It's really cool. And hello, people. And hello. Hey, yeah. Tipo, where are you based right now? Europe?
Yes, I'm in Munich right now. Hi.
Yeah, so this morning for you.
Around lunchtime, I might drop out for lunch.
I see, yeah. Thank you. It's really good to see all our old friends. And I believe some of the people here are our new friends, and welcome. Hello, Shubuhangi. If someone could pronounce it perfectly, please let me know. Thank you.
I blame my parents. You're absolutely fine. It's pronounced as Shubangi.
Shubangi. Oh, cool, good. So I got my today's learning. Thank you, Shubangi.
No, you weren't too bad.
Thank you.
I saw an emoji person.
Yeah, I even don't know how to name that emoji. Can anyone help me? We have a person whose name and also the avatar isn't the same emoji. So
Same emoji. Who didn't know we can set emoji as the name. Oh.
It's a new learning day too. Awesome. So now we have almost 30 people.
Yeah, I guess we can start. Okay, cool. All right. Yeah. Welcome. Hi everyone. Welcome to the WebHack number 58. My name is Shitin, and you can call me Neo. And I'm pretty happy to be your host to give you a short introduction about WebHack and today's event. So let's get started. So this is today's schedule. So we will have a short introduction about WebHack and then a panel discussion where you guys will be asking questions to our panelists about about today's topic from IC to manager. So about WebHack, for those who are unfamiliar with WebHack, we are a community who are made up of passionate developers who are committed to share their knowledge, skills, and experience with others. And we used to host in-person event in Tokyo area, but after pandemic, we went fully online. With that said, we are still working pretty hard to grow the community. So we have our YouTube channel. You can search WebHack Meetup on YouTube for the previous recordings. And also our community is still growing. So we have 1,600 members and over 2,000 attendees nowadays. So if you are interested in giving a talk, please fill up the form and share your talk, your proposal with us. Okay, so tonight we have incredible lineup of panelists, and we are honored to invite Fangda to be our facilitator. for this panel discussion. And we will be using Slido for asking questions. And here's the link, and you can scan the QR code for the Slido. And for those who are not familiar with Slido, after you go to this website, you can see the screen like this, and you input your full name, and then click join event. Then you can ask question and also upvote question from other people. So without further ado, let me hand control to Fangda and enjoy the meetup.
Thank you, Neil.
Oh, sorry, excuse me. There you go.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Neil. If you can stop sharing your screen, that would be awesome. And before we start everything, then let me do a very brief self-introduction. My name is Fangda Wang, and I'm engineering manager at Indeed. And today I will be the facilitator for the panel discussions. More importantly, next we're going to invite all our panelists to do self-introductions. Let's go by Ankush first.
Sure. Thanks, Bangla. Hey, everyone. This is Ankush joining you from Singapore. In terms of introductions, I'm currently a senior engineering manager at Indeed, and I joined Indeed as a staff software engineer about 4 years ago, and I moved to management to management is basically a lateral transition to a management in approximately 3 years ago, and was promoted to senior engineering manager a year ago. In terms of work wise, I worked at 2 different products at Indeed. One of them was a subscription product for enterprise companies, and now I'm working on a different product called recommendations, basically generating recommendations for job seekers and jobs to help find the match quickly. Yeah, that's about me. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Then next, Paul, how about you?
Sure. So my name is Paul, and I'm an engineering manager at Indeed with the company data platform team. And I guess a little bit of my background is I started at Indeed as a new college grad. I switched teams a few times. So I started out within the job aggregation team. From there, I transitioned to another sister team that I helped create, which was a team focused on finding job sites all over the world. From there, I became a tech lead of that team. Over time, that team transitioned back to the US, and I started with a new team focused on kind of company-related data, which ended up becoming the team I'm currently on. From there, I transitioned into management. And so I've been here as a manager for the past 3 years now, I think.
Awesome. All right, Rahul.
Hey, hi, thanks for having me. I'm Rahul. I'm joining you from Hyderabad, India. And I'm a director of engineering at Indeed. And my teams are helping folks in the lightly skilled segment, as we call them, get jobs. So I now roughly have a little less than 2 decades of experience. Half of that was spent as an individual contributor. I transitioned into a managerial role, I don't know, maybe 9 or 10 years back. This is my second stint in Indeed. I was previously a manager here. Now I'm a director. I've done this in the past. So I was with Adobe Systems twice. I was with Microsoft twice. I was once with Google. Now I'm here and enjoy every bit of life.
Hey. Yeah, thank you so much. So now I'm going to share our Slido link. You can scan the QR code. Neil, if you could help share the Slido link in the chat, that would be super helpful.
Sure.
What we're going to do is please feel free to log on this page, post a question, or upvote others' questions that you really want to hear all our panelists' answers. Then we'll go from the most upvoted question one by one, and we will try to give all the panelists a few minutes to answer, to share their insights and experiences. So how about having look at the currently most upvoted question first? If you look back to your career, what has been the biggest career breakthrough moment where you really felt like you got to the next phase of your career? So let's start with Ankush again.
Sure. Thanks, Magda. So in respect to management, I think one of the event, basically at my previous company where I was working at a startup, I felt like I had this breakthrough. The situation was that my CTO, who I was reporting to, changed, and the new CTO was based out of US, and the whole team was based out of Singapore. And suddenly, I was working mainly as a IC, focusing on technical stuff mostly, and I was given a chance to lead a group of people as a team lead, and also apart from technical aspects, look into many other aspects of running the team, be it in terms of cost, prioritization of work, evaluating how valuable the time of team members are. So I felt like I went from focusing on one dimension of from technical aspect to doing many more, coaching people, cost, prioritization, and also actually managing upwards, making sure the CTO, who was based out of US, had enough information to make decisions and got the right information as well. So I felt like that was the first big change in my actual work. Although I was not in a management position as such, it was more of a team lead role, but that really changed, I think, the way I was thinking about how to approach different problems and the aspects I considered.
Thank you. Paul, how about you?
This one's a bit tricky for me. I think for some people, maybe they're kind of a bit more hungry for management and kind of jump at the first opportunity. And I don't know that that was me in particular. And so just kind of thinking about that transition, I think there are many opportunities for me to transition into management, and I don't know that that's what I wanted. There was an opportunity for me when my manager left Indeed, and there was an option of become the manager for the team or have somebody manage the team who has too much on their plate already and won't have much time to dedicate to your team. So it was an easy choice for me to manage the team. And so as I stepped into that role, I don't really feel like I knew what it entailed. As a tech lead, I was very responsible for the team in the first place from a technical perspective. But at Indeed, we call our managers TDMs, which is Technical Delivery Manager. And what was kind of hammered into me by my manager, which was really helpful, is you're responsible for the delivery of your team, your product. And so you're not focused necessarily on design. You're not necessarily focused on implementation. And it was this realization that your focus as an engineering manager is basically like, how do you get things out faster? How do you get things out more efficiently? How do you do it well? And so I think that was learning that idea and being more comfortable with what was expected from my role, I think really helped me to do that much better.
Great, that's a cool man side. And how about you, Rahul?
Yeah, okay. Then there have been plenty of such moments, I'd say. But one that I clearly recall is it was my initial days as a manager. And, there are always times when you doubt yourself, or it's hard to see what is your role, what is really expected of you. And my then manager and mentor, they gave me a perspective of looking at things. They said that, hey, your role is to look at everything like it's a machine, right? And do you want to push your engine so hard today that it won't work tomorrow, or it burns out? Or how do you keep it functioning better and faster? How do you make it more efficient? How do you oil it? right? And that gave me a changed my perspective of looking at the team like that. Hey, I am, and because I came back from a strong individual contributor sort of background, right? And I wasn't impacting my team in the same way as I was then doing as a manager. So that helped set the perspective right. So like that day after I had the change in perspective, I felt that yeah, the next phase of my career has started. It's no longer making an impact as an IC. It's about to, look at this machine that is in front of me or the system that is in front of me and making sure that it is performing to the fullest of its capabilities and seeing it grow.
Awesome. Thank you. And let's have a look at the next question. What skills do you need to do well at your engineering manager position, and how did you develop those skills? Ankush, how about sharing your opinions with us?
Sure. It's a difficult one, especially in regards to how you develop those. Okay. So some of those skills that I think are really relevant to my role are, so one of them, once you're at the senior engineering manager position, you are leading multiple teams, and possibly through either through other managers or other tech leads or other leads from the teams. So one of the really important skill is how do you work through others, especially as multiple teams when you're not involved at a daily level, and how do you put balances and checks in place to ensure things are healthy, especially things around culture, the team health, especially when you don't have visibility on a daily level. That's one of those. The other two important ones from my perspective are, one, making sure your teams have a coherent strategy and long-term plan, and it's well communicated to the teams so that they relate to the mission, relate to the work they're doing, and feel pride in the work they're doing. And the third thing in relation to that is setting up the team structure or organization to achieve your strategy and the long-term goals. So as you grow in engineering manager to director level, especially, like, you will have a lot of people under you, but you really want to make sure that they're organized the way it will be most efficient, as Rahul said, in the long run to deliver the long-term goals you want to do. Yeah, those are the top three that comes to my mind.
Oh, they're awesome. Thank you. Paul, it's your turn.
I like that you consolidated them, Ankush. I don't know that I'm going to be as successful at that, but I'm going to take a stab at this. And I think some of these are going to riff off a bit of kind of what you're going for. And I think one of the first ones you mentioned was like working through others. And one of the ways that I think about that is like, how can you help other people be successful? And I think coming from a tech lead into management, I think it's really easy to just like want to be hands-on with stuff and just get it done and say like, okay, I know how to design this, I know how to work this just to do it. But it's like, how do you take a step back? What might happen now is it might result in something being delivered a lot slower. But the whole point is that if you can kind of help coach somebody through that process, you've now effectively replicated yourself, which is fantastic. And just keep doing it over and over and over again is kind of the goal that you're going for. So the way I think about this, and I think this is a really great question in terms of like skills or talents, is it's an entirely separate position. It's not like you go from tech lead to manager and you're like, I was promoted. It's like, you're just doing a different role. The skills required are totally different. Like the mental model of the things that you're working with are somewhat similar, but the way that you interact with it is completely different. So one of the other things I think about is like awareness and visibility. And again, Ankush kind of touched on this, is like, where is your team trying to go and how do you help them get there? You don't need to focus on like doing the things, but how do you make sure your team is doing the right things? How do you stay one step ahead of where they are and make sure that every step you're about to take is the right one? Another one that I think is really important is probably like communication. And I think that goes really hand in hand with kind of like understanding and empathy. Like I think Rahul said this in the last question, was like, how do you oil the machine well? And I think that requires you to actually understand how people are doing. Like, are people stressed about what they're working on? Are they stressed about deadlines? Are they anxious about things that are happening outside work? And it's like, how can you kind of manage those situations well? How can you care for the people on your team? How can you care for your product? And I think understanding that and also showing that is a very difficult thing to do.
Seconds.
The other thing that I'm kind of thinking about that is a bit harder for me to communicate is like, how do you learn these skills? And I think a lot of it is just like constant reflection, right? So it's good to take a step back, periodically or consistently to some extent, like every month or every 3 months, and say like, how did that go? What went well? What didn't go well? And sometimes you might not have enough awareness to be like, everything went well. So instead, look to people who you think are doing their job even better, or they're like, you're really impressed by what they do, and say like, what skills or what things are they doing that I don't do that is really cool? And like, how can I learn from them? How can I grow from them? And certainly reaching out to them as a mentor as well is certainly a cool relationship too, where you can get feedback from them. Like, how would you tackle this particular situation? And then kind of reflect on how you did it and see what the difference is.
Awesome. Rahul.
Wow, I mean, those were like amazing discussions already by Paul and Ankush. So I don't know, maybe I'm going to just rant, like I'm going to repeat a lot of them. So instead, some of the stuff that my mentors have told me that help people succeed as a manager, I'll just talk about them. And which I've seen in practice helping me. One is the strategic thinking, like everything that you do after you become a manager, and it's not just related to a manager. Like this is something you should be doing even otherwise, but more so as a manager, is that you take a more strategic approach. In your mind, it's not just about tactically getting this thing done today. Like, how do I do it? How is this particular thing going to affect me a week from now, a month from now, a year from now? It's like, so of course you take you don't build for 2 years from now, but you keep that in mind, right? And that's a very essential skill to have as a manager. Like even in other things, even in investing in relationships, when you meet a person to say hi and you're talking to them to help fix a bug, you don't just talk to them tactically or in a transactional manner that, hey, you help me and then I'm gone. Like, no, you try to invest in building that long-term relationship, because it's not just today that I need them. I need them again and again, and we need to collaborate. So getting that strategic thing, practicing that strategic thinking in whatever you are doing, or at least having it at the back of your mind, is very useful. The second would be, and it's a common, like commonly people say that, how do you go to the next level? Well, you make yourself redundant at the current level, and that's how you go to the next level, right? So building more leaders, like finding, spotting talent, building leaders, and helping them. So the more leaders you grow, the more leadership you build in your team, the easier it would, like your job would become. You would be able to delegate even more, and things will just become sort of an auto-run system if you can build. And I think Ankush already touched upon it when he said that building your correct org, thinking about it all the time, is a very useful skill to have. And finally, more of an advice, it is like learning to trust your gut. You'd realize more and more that you would not have all the information, or even when you have information, you cannot pass on that information because of XYZ confidentiality reasons or something else. So like learning to deal with ambiguity and learning to deal with a lot of information that you have responsibly, and trusting your gut when you really do not know all the answers, like that helps. So yeah, I just say these three things.
I would like to add something which I missed a part of the question, and Paul and Rahul kind of touched on, is how do you develop those skills? So a couple of things mentioned by Paul and Rahul, I want to explicitly call out. One of them is reflection. So constantly, especially in terms of ambiguity, you're making decisions. You really want to reflect and retrospect at regular intervals and see how your decisions are turning around. And that's where you build that gut feeling. I think that over time, and you realize what works and what doesn't work in which context. The second one, I think Rahul touched upon it a couple of times, but I want to call out explicitly is having a mentor or a coach. I think you may not have all the skills to need it, but having a mentor or a coach is really, really helpful, where you can discuss your situations, your scenarios, and get their feedback, perspectives, right? And a good coach will never tell you an answer. They will really ask you more questions, but that helps you to think through different situations. So that's how you kind of learn how to grow those skills, I would say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Alrighty. Well, we really got a lot of insightful opinions, and thank you for people who posted this question that really stimulates and inspire those great discussions. Looking forward to more inspirational questions too. So next question is, I think, well, you slightly mentioned, but we really want to hear more about how did you decide either the IC track or the management track, and looking back, would you make the same decision or why? Ankush, do you want to go first?
Sure, happy to. So in my case, how a couple of times where I was at this crossroad, the basic principle for me has been very simple, which is in which direction do I get to learn more and get challenged while adding back to the organization or the team I'm working with. So that has been the basic principle that helped me decide. A couple of scenarios where at one point of time, I felt like being an IC would be more challenging for me, but also more beneficial for the team. And I decided to take that. Whereas another instance where I wasn't being challenged or didn't really enjoy the work as an IC, but I thought there were a lot of opportunities and challenges in the management side, especially the business side, and that stimulated me. And that has been my principle to decide. Yeah.
Thank you. How about you?
I hope my answer is not too boring, but it's really similar to Ankush's. I kind of touched a little bit earlier about how I transitioned into management with my manager leaving. And I think the first one that came to my mind, I think I was very close with my team, and I thought this would be a really good benefit for my team. Like I could continue being a tech lead, we could pull in another management, and I'm thinking this manager doesn't really have time to dedicate to our product, or time to dedicate to us as individuals, or mentorship capacity either. And so I thought, if I step into this role, like even if I'm terrible at it, maybe I could be beneficial. At least I have time. At least I have time for my team. Beyond that, I was thinking, what do I want to get out of management? Again, I think I was fortunate that I didn't really look at it as a promotion. It was kind of like, okay, I see this as a different role, but the more I started doing it, the more I felt like, wow, this is just completely different than being an IC. And I loved the new challenges. I just felt like every single time I evaluated myself, or whether I was being evaluated as a manager, I felt like, wow, there's just so much that I don't know yet. It's just so easy to find new problems. It's so easy to find growth. I really enjoyed that. I think as an IC, a lot of the problems start to look really similar. I guess when I first started out, I thought like, there's going to be an infinite number of challenges. It's going to be crazy. But a lot of the shapes of a lot of technical problems start to look similar. You increase your scope, or you work through others a little bit differently, similar to management. But I didn't find the type of challenges being so radically different as opposed to being a manager, where I find the changes are just completely different. And it gives you a new perspective on what you're doing as an IC, and how you're contributing to your product or your team. The other thing that I've learned, not necessarily in that immediate transition, is just the increase in scope. I think management, you are, again, transitioning to working through people. And so I think it's much easier to increase the scope at which you're delivering things. So before, maybe you're focused on like, how do I deliver these 3 apps? Now you're kind of focused on like, how do I deliver this product for my team? Now you're kind of looking at, maybe I'm managing multiple teams. Like, how am I, working this whole product direction? And I think that's really exciting to me, because then you can see like these more tangible changes at Indeed and say like, I left my footprint there, which is a really cool thing to think about. It also gives you a chance to tackle like problems that are much larger in scope. I think as an IC, you can also do that, but I think moving up that path is very difficult because there's not many places where you actually have a spot to fit in. As a manager, I think there's a lot more opportunities there to kind of grow that scope.
Alrighty. Yeah, I think one point really worth the highlights. Transition from an IC to a manager isn't a promotion. It's considered as a lateral transition. Ankush also said that. All right, thank you, Paul. Very interesting and very insightful sharings. Then Rahul.
Yeah, I think I need to answer the second part of the question first. Like looking back, what would I have done differently? Because I sort of, for a very long time, I had opportunities both to be a manager and an IC, and there was a need for both in the team always because the organization was growing pretty fast. But somehow I had that feeling in mind that there's something more geeky about being an individual contributor, and it sounded more sexy in some way. And I felt that management would be boring. You aren't really solving the toughest problems and the real challenges in solving things. So if I could go back in time, I would tell my younger self to have a open mind. Like you should be able to look at all the aspects of any role, not just being an IC or a manager, or even being a QA, even being a product manager, right? So that you are open to exploring what it takes to be that role, and approaching it with a more open heart and mind, right? So ultimately for me, instead of me taking a decision was sort of taken to become a manager, because there really was a need. And my then manager felt that I would really help the team, and it was only then that I realized that I loved being a manager so much. And there was it opened sort of a new doors, I'd say, into how you operate, into how you look at the entire process. And I said it earlier, right? You sort of pull yourself out of the context and then start taking a look at the bigger pictures. And it's always about bigger pictures and how do you fit, and how does this bigger picture fit in some other bigger picture. So yeah, I was more of go with the flow kind of person. But I would now tell my younger self that, hey, be open to ideas and be more open to exploring more.
Thank you. The next question, I think, well, again, we slightly touched this, but it would be really great if you could provide explicit answers. That have you ever thought of returning to an IC role? And Ankush, how about you?
Sure. I think the answer for any manager would be yes. I'm going to just state it out. Yes, I think after being a manager, you often wonder whether you should go back to IC, especially if you're a new manager. You do miss coding, you miss a lot of things that comes from being an IC. Personally, for me, I think I use the same principle where if am I growing and getting challenged in my current role, or the other one seems more challenging and more rewarding in terms of personal growth, definitely has been one way to how I get a clarity. So far I have not changed any tracks yet. So I don't think I'm fully qualified to answer that, but my way of getting clarification has been the same principle, whether am I growing here and if there are any challenges in management track versus IC track.
Oh, thank you. Pal, what do you think?
Like Ankush said, Yes, absolutely. And I think I really liked Rahul's answer to the last question. I definitely envision an IC as being like a much more sexy role, and kind of moving up there is like, wow, that's so cool and very respectable and very challenging and difficult. But after becoming a manager, I think, no, this is a really cool role as well. What I have the ability to act on is awesome. I have the ability to affect people's daily lives as they're working on this team, which I think I had zero insight as an IC, realizing that my manager actually, hopefully cared about my well-being. I don't know that I can really answer this last part about like, how did I get clarification? Because honestly, I don't personally see myself being a manager for the rest of my life. Like maybe I will, maybe I won't. And I think I could very easily see myself switching back to an IC and then switching back to management. I think if the right position opens up on the right team and those interests align, then that's what I'm going to do. And I think maybe what I'm kind of leaning towards is like my happiness, my fulfillment. And similar to what Ankush said, is like, am I growing? Am I being challenged? That's usually kind of where I feel my fulfillment. So if I feel like I'm stuck in my position, I've got nowhere to kind of grow horizontally or upwardly as a manager, I might feel that hole to be like, okay, you got to change things up. It doesn't necessarily mean I want to be an IC at that point, but I like the challenge of feeling that growth. So I guess I don't really have a good answer in terms of like which one I would lean towards, but I would ask yourself before you pull to one or the other, is like, what do you want to accomplish? What do you want to get out of it? As a manager, I definitely feel like my technical skills, like implementation skills, must be weakening if I'm not exercising them, but I'm growing a whole new set of skills. If I was to switch back into IC, there's skills that I'd be building up again, but at the same time, I'm bringing in a completely new perspective as an IC that I had from a manager. So it's kind of like, not necessarily a step back, it's kind of like a step sideways almost in terms of my growth. And I think my ability to have a larger visibility over my team and where my product is trying to go would bring a whole nother dimension to being an IC.
Thank you. Rahul, anything you want to add?
No, it's always a hard question, like transitioning to an IC and to a manager. And the great thing with companies like Indeed is that there is a path to transition, and when opportunities present themselves, you can actually make those transitions when you want to. Like the framework that I use is like, so how do you differentiate IC work and managerial work? Of course, those are two very different, like think of it like, suppose you're writing your self-evaluation at the end of some performance cycle. Like the evidence that you would give as an IC or an evidence that you would share as a manager are going to totally look very different. However, if you take the discussion to how are you growing, like those behaviors, those rubrics are not really very, very different. So for example, you need to demonstrate ownership to grow. Okay? You need to demonstrate independence. You need to demonstrate business alignment. And there are scopes and ways to do that, both by being an IC and by staying a manager. Right. So if at some point of time you feel like, you aren't generating, or the kind of evidences that you are generating isn't as exciting as they used to be, or you're just, sometimes refreshing yourself and forcing yourself to do something different, that's not a bad idea. And maybe I'll do it just to refresh myself, just to understand what's happening more in the IC world these days, just to force myself to, understand that world more. But that could be one motivation if I move to IC.
Cool, thank you. Let's have a look at the next question from Harry. What's the suitable IC level at which you can think of switching to a manager? And is there any preferred years of experience? Ankush, what do you think?
Sure. I think switching to management is really a question about the company first, because you need to really understand what the management position requires of you. And different companies may have different requirements. Specifically for Indeed, there are a couple of critical requirements. One is delivery manager. So you're basically technical delivery manager. So you need to look after the delivery of the whole team. And second is people management. So you really need to have skills for coaching and helping people grow. Right? So these are not all of those, but at least two of the most important ones, in my opinion. So I would say, when are you ready to switch to a manager? It really depends on, are you comfortable working through others? Do you enjoy growing other people and trusting them to deliver things? So these are things, once you feel comfortable, I think you can make a switch to manager. Especially for Indeed, I think we do expect these behaviors at staff level, or that's a starting position for management. So once you are there, I think that makes sense to take it. If you are interested, you can try to switch to a manager role. Lastly, what should be a preferred year of experience? I don't think there is anything, honestly. Here is really when you're comfortable with those skills and really want to do this, that should be okay to transition.
Thank you. Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, I think similar to what Ankush said, it's really important that you understand the expectations of your role as a manager. Let's say, for example, if your role is primarily people management, then if you have strong communication skills and the ability to kind of talk with people, empathize people, and kind of understand what's going on, I think those requirements are like super different from, like a delivery manager that we have at Indeed. And I think you kind of don't necessarily need all the technical skills, or you might be kind of filling that role as a product manager as well. Maybe you're a people product manager. And so your ability to kind of see a product holistically and kind of move that forward, identify, wins for your team, again, is a very different expectation than what we have necessarily at Indeed. So similarly, I'm going to speak to my experience at Indeed, where it's important that I do have knowledge of product. It's important that I do kind of guide that product, but I do have a product partner to work with. I am responsible for people management, and I am responsible for delivery. And when I think about like years of experience or what kind of level that I would expect to be at, you kind of have to think like, what are you trying to do? And, a lot of the time you're working through people. How are you going to work through people if you don't have any experience doing what you're asking them to do? Like, you can't guide them. You're just like, do the thing. I can't give you guidance, but good luck. I mean, there is some amount of like, you can always pair them up with mentors, which is certainly a good thing to do, even if you are able to coach them, because they might have a different learning style than you. They might be able to learn differently from a mentor without the pressure of knowing that this person is not their manager. And the other thing too is just like thinking about the kind of scope that you're responsible for. As an IC, especially when I started out, like my scope was like, okay, how do I understand this application that's just not working? How do I understand this application so I can implement a feature? And if that's my visibility, like I don't know how I'm going to guide a team. I think that's going to be very difficult. As I grew as an engineer, when I became kind of the tech lead for a team, I'm responsible for identifying like how we want to implement something technically. And now most of my delivery is not myself. I'm kind of driving the delivery for a group of people. That's where that scope starts to be much more similar to kind of your first level of management, where you're now saying like, okay, maybe I'm not going to do the implementation, or maybe I'm not going to do the design either, but I'm responsible for making sure people can deliver this together. I can identify areas that people are strong at or weak at, and then I can help guide them through that process. So I think it's a combination of like, how do you build the skills so that you can then share them with other people? If you don't have those skills, I think it's really hard to teach. And the more you teach it, the more you grow it too. I think that might be all I can speak to here.
That's awesome. Thank you. Rahul, what do you think?
It's difficult to add to what has already been said. I'll probably try to explain the rationale that generally a senior engineering, when you are a senior engineer with some years of experience, like it is then recommended to move to or to make a transition to management possible, and not before that. So for example, if you are a new college grad who has just joined a new company, you wouldn't want to entrust them with managing folks because you do not have enough evidence with you that they'd be able to, deal with the kind of situations that are about to come forward when you're dealing with complex people. Like, so for example, you do not want, so if there's a conflict in the team, you do not want somebody to come in and further aggravate it. Like, at least you should have seen that happen enough times in your life as maybe a person standing as a bystander, and then inculcate in you those skills that are required to resolve conflicts. So again, like, it depends from company to company. How many years of experience do they think it's okay? But certainly, whatever the laid rubrics are for your company, when you have shown enough evidence that you're ready, you should be ready. Like, there is no real time, like 2 years or 3 years. Nobody can put a number on when you're ready. I've seen startups where just after 1 year, people have started managing and they've just done fine. But because of the nature of the work, the amount of exposure that they got within 1 year was like tremendous. So yeah, it's whenever you feel ready and your management also trusts you that you're ready.
Thank you. All righty. Next question. So, does technical knowledge matter as you climb the management ladder? And if yes, how could you keep yourself updated on those technical trends? Ankush.
Yeah. So in my personal opinion, it definitely matters. I'll explain that first, like why. Basically, when you are the level of detail that you need to know might change, but you might want to keep up with the technology that changes and not get outdated. So you want to maybe have an overview of what technologies are coming up, what problems they solve, and how. Maybe it will not have a very deep, for example, knowledge about how to operationalize it in the terms of are you setting the right settings or something, right? But you definitely want to keep yourself aware of what the technical advancements that are happening. How do you keep yourself updated on those tech trends is just try to have certain time dedicated in your schedule to read up more about what's happening in technology, especially in the area that you are working with. If you have certain product areas or technical areas that you are heavily involved in, you can't, of course, learn everything and anything on this world, right? So you really need to focus on what's relevant to you. But I definitely think it's going into, even if you grow into management, even at higher levels, you're expected to set the direction of the teams and also find gaps, skill gaps, for example, in your teams that are relevant to your problems that you're solving. So if you're working on recommendations, you want to understand how the advancements in machine learning models or other TNN areas are happening so that you can identify those gaps and make sure that teams are equipped with right tools and technology to actually make yourself successful. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Very valuable. Pal.
Yeah, I think absolutely. At least at Indeed, that's the case. And I think I am often in meetings where I'm still surprised, like how, regardless of how far up you go, how technical some people are and some of the questions that I get asked, the team gets asked. And part of me feels like, okay, am I the only one that maybe doesn't feel so technical? I think maybe I'm selling myself short sometimes. But I'm really impressed, especially at Indeed, like the level of technical skill that many managers, senior managers, directors have. And I think it's actually really critical because if you think about the types of problems they're trying to solve. So for example, let's say that you are hosting all of your products on your own data centers. and you want to increase your reliability. And so, you're saying like, let's move to the cloud, let's move to, publicly used cloud, let's use like AWS or something like that. As an individual team, you probably have little power to actually make that change happen, especially if you're working in a really large organization. You might be able to kind of talk that conversation up, but it would be better if really high up, somebody up there was technical and was like, as far as reliability goes, like we're not really doing what's modern or what other tech companies are taking advantage of. And like, let's kind of push this down and say like, hey, let's migrate to AWS. It's really expensive, but the costs are worth it, right? I think that's much easier to do from top down than from bottom up. Versus like, how are you applying how are you applying technology or algorithms to your particular product? Like from top down, that's going to be harder, but you kind of have to have some kind of technical knowledge to be able to say like, okay, I see the problem we're trying to solve. Like, what do people typically throw at this problem? And it's really good to know that as a manager, because you might be missing something really obvious if you don't. So like Ankush said, it's really important that you're aware of your particular problem space and how other companies are actually solving it. Outside of your company, what other companies are trying to solve a very similar problem space? I would say almost you can find a duplicate somewhere. Somebody is trying to replicate what you're doing, and how are they doing it? Like you can read about the company's blog posts. You can just kind of dig through their sites a little bit and say like, okay, like I can guess at what they're doing here based off of the kind of, again, I'm looking at this from a company data perspective. What kind of content do they have on their site? How are they actually getting it? How diverse is their content? How rich is each content for each one of those companies? And then kind of like digging into it to say like, how do they get there? I think another really good opportunity to do this is through like design reviews. The way that we host them at Indeed is a team hosts a design review, and then we invite people from other teams to kind of contribute to them. And so the first step of that is maybe an engineer on your team is designing something. Your first job as a manager is like poke holes in it. Like, let's say, for example, you know the answers. Okay, poke holes and teach them. But let's say you don't know the answers, and you could ask questions like, why are you going with X instead of Y? And now you're learning stuff. Another thing you could do is also looking at other teams' design reviews too, is saying like, okay, I see the problem space that they had, and how do they choose to tackle it? And if I knew nothing about the space, I could go, okay, that's interesting. I'm going to put that in my tool belt. Next time I come across a similar problem space, I might use that. So I think it's good to set aside time to learn things, but it's also good to just look like, what do you have in front of you that you should be consuming, and you should be kind of applying very directly and very often.
Thank you. Rahul, what do you think?
No, great answers. And being, good at your craft, like always helps. That said, like you realize pretty soon, as you grow as a manager, is that the sheer number of technologies that the number of your teams would be working on, it would simply be impossible for you to be an expert in all. Like I am managing close to 7+ teams now, right? And if I try to say that I know all of them, I'd be fooling myself. So, and if I try to create time to learn all of that, probably that would not be possible as well. But as a manager, the trick that you learn pretty fast is that you know, I may not know the answer. So as Paul said, like having, like, even when you go to a design review for a design that your team doesn't own or you know less about, what experience teaches you is the ability to ask the right questions, right? Sometimes you do not know the answer, but as a manager, an essential skill to develop is to find who knows the answer. So I know a guy who knows a guy, but I know how will we be able to find the answers. Now, so that is one part. The second is it's a double-edged sword. Like if you think you are an expert in the room and you are sort of in a position of power, like managers are, because your team will tend to hear you a lot, right? When you speak, people are going to hear you as if you're an expert. So when you speak, you have to make sure that you are speaking only when you're speaking responsibly, right? You better know your craft before you say it, because sometimes there are junior members in the team who would simply not question you, assuming that, hey, you have far more experience than I do. So being more cautious there is really important. And going like, it's a balance of how much do you want to understand about a technology, and clearly understanding how much of it you do not know, right? As a IC, one of the tricks that I learned was I could extrapolate, because I knew so many stacks that I could extrapolate that, oh, I have seen this pattern here, it might be the same pattern here, and it would work. And I would just say it during the design reviews, and a lot of times I'd be right, because yeah, I have that experience. But extrapolating as a manager, then again, you think twice before you do that, because yeah, there are some chances that you'd not be questioned by your team, or else build a culture in your team where everyone questions and everyone asks you to produce data. So yeah, that is probably how I would answer this question. And keeping your updated, yeah, just read a lot. I mean, internet is the best and the worst source of information. Yeah, I think I spend a lot of time on YouTube videos. And again, like, after you have to spend a lot of time finding what is a good video and a good source, and then you can start, subscribing to those channels. But yeah, just create time for yourself, at least minimum 1 hour a day. That should be it.
Thank you. All right, the next questions. Was there a moment where you realized that you are ready to be a manager from Remy? So Ankush, what do you think?
Yeah, honestly, I don't have a great answer. I did not have any one specific moment that I realized I want to be a manager. Yeah, I would rather pass it to Paul or Rahul, who might have actually a better answer than me.
I can take a stab at it. And I guess when I read this very specifically, when you are ready to be a manager, I don't know that I ever felt ready. I think I was very fortunate. I think Rahul might have mentioned this earlier, that Indeed is set up in a way that it allows people to become managers. Or there's actually, I should take a step back. There's actually a program that we have in Indeed that allows you to really try out management for a couple months, which is fantastic. And then you can step right back into an IC if you decide that's not for you. There are also lots of opportunities where managers might be wanting to coach you into management. I think we've all discussed this, like, how do you kind of replace yourself? So I think people are happy to kind of say, like, okay, we're going to put you as kind of like a coach instead of a manager, maybe. And maybe you're responsible for 2 or 3 people. And so you can kind of, again, test the waters to see, like, is this something I really want to do? And then being able to fall back. So I think my whole thinking was that Indeed is set up in such a way that I can try management, because I don't know that I'm ready, because I don't even know what this position entails. I don't know what this responsibility is. And as I felt like, okay, I'm ready for a new, to explore a new problem space or stretch myself a bit more. I think that's all I felt ready for. So as I stepped into management, I think I learned a lot of things, like a lot of my assumptions about management, what management was not fully correct. I think it was like, I understood maybe half of it by looking at it, and the other half I kind of just learned as I did it. And I guess maybe the next question is like, did I ever feel like ready or qualified to be a manager? Did I ever have a point where I'm like, you know what, like, this isn't for me, I want to roll back? I don't know that I ever had that epiphany moment of like, okay, like, this is too much for me. I did feel, I wouldn't say quite overwhelmed, but I often felt like, wow, there's so much room for improvement for me as a manager. And I guess I could see myself potentially turning back from that, but I found that more as a challenge. And I was like, I mean, I can't get any worse from here. So it's just exciting to kind of try new things.
Thank you. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I was already a manager then, and I can think of 2 moments like which reinforced and sort of told me that, yes, this is what I want to do. One was probably when I received my first positive feedback, sort of a thank you note from one of the persons who used to report to me. So it was really good. Like that particular thank you felt so good that I made a sort of a positive change in somebody's life, and to a level where like they just felt the need to say thank you for doing this as a manager. So that was there. And the second is delivery oriented. Like uh, I'm talking about days when project cycles used to be 18 months long, totally waterfall model. And I used to lead a desktop product, and we released it to the market. And yeah, all good positive reviews start filling the social media. Back then, not much of social media, but whatever there was, all the channels. So you suddenly like, uh, as an IC in the same team, I used to look for, hey, I have built this feature. What are people talking about this feature, right? And now I wanted to know everything about all the features. Like, what are people talking about this? And I wanted to know the goods, the bad, everything. Like, and then I felt that, oh, suddenly the scope has changed. I'm no longer thinking about a lesser scope. I'm probably thinking about a broader scope. So those two moments, I after that I felt that this is what I want to do more of.
Thank you. Alrighty, the next question. So, who do you think are more redundant, managers or individual contributors, especially during the recession or the current, I think, bad macro environment, economy? Ankush, what do you think?
This is a difficult one. But I'm gonna say it could be either, and depends on how do you define redundancy, right? So if as a business you are heavily invested into something like a product line or product area which is not yielding any good results, maybe the whole organization is redundant, right? Because especially if you're looking at recession or macroeconomic environment, I do think that multiple layers of management is redundant, but I strongly feel that every like teams of decent size would need someone, whoever you want to call it, a manager or a lead or someone else, would need someone to help them guide on a daily basis, tying the work to the mission and to the business, right? So I think there's definitely a need for someone to guide the teams, whether you call them a manager or not. But it can't be. I think Google did try this experiment early on in their organization where they got rid of all the managers. And I'm not sure where I read that or heard about that, but it was there were some learnings from it, and they brought back some management to some extent to based on the learning. So I wouldn't say it's either one is a direct answer. It depends on the context and how do you define what's redundant here. But I personally believe like multiple layers of management might not be the best because it can lead to loss of communication down the chain or organizational alignment. So that's my opinion.
Thank you. Paul, what's your opinion?
I don't know necessarily that I would say anything is redundant here. And I guess it's very specific to each setup. So let's say, for example, you had a team of 4 engineers and you had 2 managers, each one managing, 2 reports, and then a manager managing those 2 engineers, like those 2 managers. You could probably cut some layer in there. Like, I think those teams are just so small, but I think typically those teams aren't engineered that way because they're like, this team of 2 engineers needs a manager. It's more like somebody identified people like a growth opportunity probably. And they're like, okay, the first step to getting somebody to manage and kind of teaching them to manage is giving them 2 engineers to manage. So I think at least at Indeed, we have technical managers. So I think theoretically, if, push came to shove, you could say to those 2 managers, like, okay, you don't necessarily make sense here right now because we're trying to cut costs and kind of do more with what we have. So we're going to push you back into an IC role, which theoretically they should be able to do and transition to fine. I think the other thing that's worth considering, again, is it's like, you know, comparing a manager to an IC is not a one-to-one. And I think Ankush kind of alluded to this a little bit, but it's like, if you have the mindset that your manager is not doing anything and has no impact, I don't know for sure that they don't, but they probably have more of an impact than you realize. I think my mindset of managers before I became one was kind of like, I don't really know what they do. They manage me, and I didn't put much value on it. But actually, like, making everybody happy and making sure they're doing things that they are feeling, you know, the growth and challenge that they want to feel is actually really important. Otherwise, you're going to lose them. Like, they're just going to go to other companies. How do you get them to do the right thing? That's really important too. And I think as a manager, your focus is like, how do I make sure my team is doing the right things? And as an engineer, you're not that you don't have that vision, but you're really focused a lot of times on very specific things. And so sometimes it's hard to take a step back and think about where your product is going. So if you have a bunch of people that are heads down working on stuff, sure, they're productive, but are they doing the right things? I think another thing we talked about earlier was like, you know, what kind of technical skills are expected from you as a manager. I think that's one way to make sure that you that your value is very high, right? You have learned management skills, you've learned product skills, and you've learned technical skills. So if this question is more geared about like, how can I be the better me? Like, can I be a stronger engineer, or should I become a manager instead? I think the answer would be like, learn all the skills, get good at all of them. But I think that's a really tall ask. It's not like you can spend 8 hours being an engineer and then 8 hours being a manager each day and then spend another hour watching YouTube videos. Like, it just doesn't work. So I think it's really about, you know, what do you want out of the position? How do you grow in that position, and how do you make the best of the situation? So I don't know that redundant is the word I would use here, but just how do you grow your skills in general, and how do you find value in doing that?
Thank you. Rahul,
Yeah, rightly said. Like, I look at redundancy as, you know, like, what defines redundancy? If you're redundant, means you're probably sitting idle. And if you're probably sitting idle, then your value generation is not much or zero, right? So if your organization has a very good performance management process, and again, shameless plug to Indeed, because I think we are one organization where the performance management processes are both fair, transparent, and very well laid out, right? So to answer things differently, like, if let's say you have single IC and there's a manager on top, and there's a manager on top, and there's a manager on top, but if you are still able to show that you are creating value, whatever value means to your organization, like, then it doesn't matter. Nobody is redundant. However, if you have a flat hierarchy with one manager and plenty of people, and some of them are like not producing enough value, then that's a different problem to solve, right? So all I'll say is that a lot of times right now we see this happening in the markets where companies like, I don't know if it is Meta, who asked probably some managers to start coding. So if coding is the value that you want, then everybody should know that coding is something that we value, and this is something that you should be doing. If something else is the value, they should clearly know what is the value that we need to be creating. And if everyone is creating value, nobody is redundant. And if there are folks who are not creating the value, irrespective of whether they are ICs, managers, someone else, right? That's a different problem to solve.
I think one more thing that when I was listening to Rahul talk, I was kind of thinking about, like, you know, what a manager's role is, and Indeed in particular, it's, you know, delivery. And so what that might mean, what your role is on a team of 2 engineers versus a team of 8 engineers is completely different. If everyone on your team knows exactly what they need to do, and it's going to take 3 weeks to do it, I mean, there's nothing else to kind of coach them on aside from how to actually deliver it. So you can spend a good chunk of your time actually implementing things as well. So it's about being flexible and understanding the needs of your team. And I think exactly what Rahul said in terms of, like, what is your value? And I think as a manager, you should always assess that, like, am I actually generating value here? Would the team function without me just fine? That's a good place to put your team in. And if that's the case, what can you look to do something more valuable? I'm sure there is something.
Thank you. All right. The next question, actually, we have two questions here. So how do you usually train yourself and how do you usually train your teams? Ankush, what are your techniques?
Sure. Indeed, as an organization, actually have a lot of processes in place to ensure that engineering managers get trained well. There's not one thing, but it's like a system of many different things. So example of those are, we have calibrations, which are for performance management. So we have well-defined rubric to understand the levels and expectation of each level. And calibrations help you also get calibrated on how different shapes of individual contributors or other managers vary at the same level and how to assess the performance of those. So it does have those calibrations and rubrics for performance management, for example. We also have other examples where we have a lot of trainings for engineering managers about different things like diversity, inclusion, how to handle conflicts, change management, etc. A lot of different, basically the issues that you might see as a manager of the team, and how to honor the values that Indeed values. So we have a lot of trainings in that. And lastly, we do have a lot of engineering manager groups as well to help draw from each other's experience and discuss various situations, scenarios with the confidence that other managers would help you out and in the best spirit, right? So we have site level groups or even organizational level groups to help you out depending on which kind of scenario you're running into.
Thank you. Yeah, I just realized the question. The second part of this question is how an organization trains all the engineering managers. This is a really cool question. Paul, what do you want to add?
I think maybe it's slightly tangential. I hope it's still relevant. But I think the first question I ask myself is like, what do I want to be trained on? Like, what are the areas I want to focus on? When I think about my own growth, I think there is so many different opportunities for me to grow. And so it's actually more about like I don't focus so much on like, what are all the things that I could train myself on? I focus on like, what are the things that I want to see the most growth in and how do I then grow in those areas? And I think mentorship is a huge one. Talking with managers and talking about very specific situations, like, I want to do this well, like, how do you do this? How do you handle the situation? And then you can kind of reflect on how those things, how your style between the mentor and yourself are quite different and what you can learn from those experiences. Also, I think there's always, and Indeed, there's a lot of training. Training, I guess, is not the right word, but I would say kind of like discussion groups led by people who have more experience, and maybe they run, bi-weekly sessions where they kind of talk about really common topics or really common issues that they might have faced in that previous level. And I think those are really helpful for just thinking about the space different. I think a lot of the times my problem isn't necessarily like I see a thing I want to do and I can't do it. It's often the case that I just don't even see an opportunity that's in front of me because I didn't know I could approach it. Like, wow, I didn't know that was within my scope. That's really cool. I'd like to do that. So it's kind of like people bringing awareness to things that you're able to do. Let me see if there's anything else I want to tackle from this. How do I train myself? Again, I called out to this a lot earlier, but I think making sure that you retrospect on how you're doing. Don't wait for other people to tell you that you're doing something well. Actually ask yourself, like, how was I doing it this 3 months ago? How was I doing it this a year ago? Like, have I improved? And if not, why? I shouldn't keep doing the same things if I'm not improving. I should change what I'm doing to actually improve. So hopefully that's helpful.
It's very helpful. Thank you. Rahul, what do you think?
Yeah, so we generally utilize one-on-ones, to go through an individual's need and gaps, if we want to call them that. So there are clear laid down rubrics that help you assess, where are you or what are your gaps from the next level, right? So if you clearly know the gaps of an individual, and if the individual also acknowledges that yes, this is a gap, right? So both the things you need to happen. A, the gap needs to be identified, and B, acknowledged that for somebody to be ready to to work on it. Then we end up creating paths for them in one-on-ones for an individual's growth path. That hey, these are some of the things that we can try. So, for example, I wouldn't call it training, but for people who want to try and see what it means to be a manager, we have a great program called Emerging Managers at Indeed. So we encourage those people to join those programs, and they learn a lot and come back and tell us that, hey, this is what I ended up learning there, right? So this is for individuals. Sometimes you meet as a team, and then you identify the muscle that you want to build going forward. So, for example, we realized that one of the quarters we had to work a lot on UI, and we did not have a lot of expertise. So we took it upon ourselves that, hey, let us as a group decide that this is the quarter we will spend on UX or UI trainings, right? And we made it sort of a team OKR and started working towards them. There was another quarter that I clearly remember where we took a similar decision for AWS. People felt that they did not know enough about the internals of AWS. They were not hands-on with AWS, and so we made it like a common training for the entire team. And yes, so you figure out what those gaps are. You figure out what you really want to be, and then work towards them. For myself, I think we are just creating times. I'm more of a YouTube person. Sorry, I'm not sure if it is the best resource to train yourself, but I simply find like I feel that there are experts in the industry who translate a lot of their work into a 30-minute video, and that's why I find those videos quite useful. But yeah, that's just a personal thing.
Thank you. Alrighty, this question actually was from Tomo. Thank you, Tomo. And the next question also from Tomo. Does your company, which is Indeed, have an IC to EM transition program? If yes, what does it look like? So because we are from the same company, I think how about how you walk us through this program, and then Rahul and Ankush could add any points.
Sure. I guess I'll speak specifically to Indeed's transition program. I think I mentioned earlier 2 different routes. I think there's one where there's kind of accelerated route where it's kind of a 3-month program that we have each year, where we have a bunch of new grads come in, and we have, I guess, aspiring managers kind of lead each of those groups. And it's a really intensive program. I've heard that it's very grueling, but very exciting, I think, because things happen really fast. You're iterating really fast. You're getting thrown really into the deep end and getting to learn really quick. But for myself, and I think probably many managers at Indeed, it's more kind of like there is a natural opportunity for you to start growing people and viewing it through the lens of a manager. And so I don't remember if there was a time period, if it was like a 3-month or 6-month thing, because for my particular case, there was nobody really to be alongside of me in my role since my previous manager had left. But it was more just kind of meeting regularly or more intentionally with my manager to say, like, how are things going? Are there any issues that you're having? Like, where you feel like you're struggling? Just to really make sure that I was focusing on, like, do I like what I'm doing? Do I like this transition? I don't know. I don't think I have more to add on here.
Just to add on one thing that Rahul mentioned, there is also an exposure group, emerging managers, where you don't really become a manager, but really hear from experience of other managers about various skills you need, various situations you handle, and learn from their experience and see if is this something that you would like to try or not.
Yeah, so making folks coach in training, like we called our emerging managers or soon to be managers coach in training, because coaching is really an essential part of being a manager in Indeed. So you have to invest heavily into growing your teams, into being a coach to your team. So it's a mix of both delivery as well as people management, as well as coaching. So we do have programs and people transition in between to a coach in training role. Like the responsibilities that coaches start getting till they become a manager are also progressive in nature. Like initially, you're responsible, for example, for helping people come up with their self-evals and writing their end of year or end of quarter assessment reviews and presenting them to what we call the committees or shards for evaluation, right? So that is your initial exposure into what it takes to be really being responsible for growing an individual, right? And then soon we start adding more responsibilities slowly going forward, like more administrative things. You are responsible for approving their PTOs, holidays, requests, etc., or for small budgeting requests. And then finally, you also end up becoming their comp managers, which means you understand comp, how compensation works at Indeed, what is comp philosophy, and then you can even take compensation decisions for your team. So it's a gradual path, and it's a good, well laid out path, I'd say.
Thank you. All right. Next question from Dan. As a manager, how would you evaluate yourself when you were an IC? And do you have any advice to the younger self? Ankush, what do you think?
All right. I think, how would I evaluate myself? So the evaluation really generally comes with the company and what the company is expecting of the person at that particular level. So I don't know how would I evaluate myself. It depends on which point in time we are talking and what the company needed at that time. So I don't think I have a definite answer to that. Any advice that I would give myself? The couple of them, I think which was touched upon is that try to understand the manager role as well, or have a more open conversation about. I think as an IC, I did not spend enough time understanding just what my manager does. Giving that chance, I think, would be great. The second one would be, this is personally, like I've been really working on mostly back-end development, and that's personally I feel like I should have diversified my skills to some extent. So those are the two advices I would give myself. Yeah.
Thank you. Pal.
I think it's difficult to evaluate yourself because there's a lot of time potentially in between when you're an IC and when you're a manager. And I think if you knew all the things you knew as a manager, I think it would be very different. That being said, I think the biggest takeaway for me would be I wish I had more visibility as an engineer. The visibility that I have now as a manager, I think, has been really helpful. Being able to take a step back and asking yourself, what value am I delivering with what I'm doing right now? Is this the most valuable use of my time? I feel like I probably asked myself that as an IC as well. And I think not necessarily that I got the answer wrong, but I think there was always potentially something even of greater value that I could have been delivering. I think it was also like the mindset of like, okay, how can I deliver this, as opposed to like, how can I deliver this through somebody else? Even as an IC, I think that's a really important quality. So like, how do you achieve your end goal, and what end goal are you potentially capable of delivering? I think it's really easy, again, as an IC to say like, oh, there's this tiny bug here that's bothering me. Yes, it's technically not correct. Yes, I want to fix it. It doesn't really have much impact on the end product. And it's really tempting to just, fix some of those things. So I think if I take a step back each day and probably start each day saying like, what is the most valuable thing that I could deliver today? Is it helping my teammate with a project he's working on? Is it teaching them how to do something? Is it designing this feature so that other people have a clear direction of where they need to go? I think having that visibility would be really key for accelerating my growth as an IC.
Thank you. Value is really repeatedly mentioned word today, and I totally agree with that. Rahul, what do you think?
Yeah, I think like I worked in across different companies, different cultures, and one of the things I learned over time was that you should probably look at performance and growth as two separate things. Like performance is the measure of the value that you added over a period of time, and that value could be anything. Like somebody could be a great designer, somebody could be great at some execution, and how much did you execute in a quarter, like that or how much impact did you make, that would define your performance. Whereas growth is acquiring more and more behaviors over time, like or showing evidences against those behaviors that would take you to the next level. Like understanding what next level is, what are the behaviors that you need to sort of inculcate and then move forward. This is something that I did not understand very clearly as an IC. All I was interested in was more and more execution. Right, like so if I could go back in time, I would say understand that these are two different things, and invest your time across both on creating value and on growing and understanding what are the gaps between where you are and where the next level is.
Thank you. All right, the next question from Jay. What if you find that one of your team members better than you, and how could you help them to plan their careers? Ankush.
Cool. I'm gonna start with saying that most likely, most of your teammates are gonna be better than you at one thing or another, right? As a manager, it does not really mean that you're the best in the team. Actually, it's more likely you, as someone called out, like manager is a different role. So you're doing a different, has different skills and doing a different role. Most likely, other people have various different strengths in your team. As a manager, what you want to do is you want to find out what their strengths are and build actually a set of skills on the team, right? Complementary skills. That would be the actual ideal situation. So rather than having like 5 copies of same skill, you really want to have diversity. Obviously, with some overlap, but you really want to have diversity of skills. So it's most likely you will have people better than you. How do you help? I think that's pretty much for me is the same as everyone else. Like you really, this is the same as coaching people on any people on your team. You want to highlight their strengths and the areas of improvement, and especially tie them to their aspirations in their career. So sometimes it may be very simple that you have all the chances on your team, or in your organization, and other places you may find that you may not be able to provide them enough opportunities or areas of growth. And either way, you need to be responsible for that to some extent. Help them grow directly or indirectly via maybe helping them find more relevant work, maybe relevant teams if you think you can't provide them the right opportunities based on their skills. So I think this, to me, is not different from any other coaching any other person on the team.
Thank you. Pal, it's your turn.
I think I'm having a little difficulty understanding the intent of the question, but I think there could be a couple ways to kind of approach it. I think the first one that's easy to kind of look at is like, is better than you. And you're kind of taking this mentality of like, the skills they have are amazing. Like, I don't really know how to handle them, or, what to do for them. And I think Ankush was kind of referring to this as like, the skills that are required to do your job versus the members of your team are probably quite different. The way that you're viewing your team members often is like, how can I multiply their abilities? Like, how can I make them even better than where they are, regardless of like what their skill levels are? I don't think that any particular member on your team is thinking like, how can I multiply the powers of my manager? Like, I think it's just a completely different mindset to what you're approaching. But going more in line with what Ankush was saying in terms of like, okay, let's imagine that their ability to architect or design things is like significantly better than what yours was as an IC or currently is as an engineering manager. I think doesn't change your mission at all in terms of like, how do you multiply their skills? And you might find yourself in the position of, okay, well, there's no feedback that I can give them that would be valuable because they've heard all of it before. So there's kind of a couple directions you can go, like who could mentor them? So it's, again, I think Rahul mentioned this earlier. It's like, you need to be good at finding the right people to do the right things. So I know somebody that knows somebody who definitely is kind of like at a different level of what they're doing. Like, how can I connect them? How can I get them coaching that they need? Another thing too is like learning how to ask the right questions, which again is a skill you develop as a manager. You might know nothing about this particular space, but having that skill of being able to ask the right questions can still make you really useful. I think the better people get at their skills, it's less about like, I was told the right answer, I was told I was wrong. And it was more like somebody asked me a question that made me really think hard about it. And that's kind of how I grew and taught myself. The other thing that's valuable here is like actually talking with this person and trying to identify like, how do they want to grow? What areas are they interested? How do they want to be challenged? It might be the case that this person is, twice your age or has been in industry significantly longer. And I would hope that they don't look down at you as a manager and say like, you don't have experience. You're not as old as me. You can't teach me anything. I don't think most people think like that. I think that we all realize that we all bring a different set of skills to the table and we all can help each other in different ways and boost the skills that we don't ourselves have. So I think it's not something you should be worried about, but instead be excited that you can learn and grow from each other.
Thank you. Rahul, what do you think?
I first ask a question on the time because it's 5:30 here in IST, and then do we have time left? Can we stretch it by 5 minutes? Otherwise, like.
That's a good question, as we only have this question and one last question. If the time works for all of you, I think how about just finishing answering all the questions?
Okay.
That's a
Yeah. So the quick answer to the first one, which is what if you find out one of your team member is better than you? I think my answer would be you fold your hands and you thank God. And because now you have a person you can delegate a lot of things to, right? So you find a way to grow them, right? And it's sort of a golden rule, like everyone wants to grow. You should try to grow people in your team. So you just find the gaps from the next level. There's always some gap. If not, then it's time to promote them. Like they already should be at the next level. So you find the level where they are, find the level which is next to that level, and figure out what the gaps are, and help them understand them, acknowledge them, so that they can start working on them.
Thank you. Alrighty, we're very conscious about time, and let's try to provide the sweet and short answers to the last question. Is there any situations that you wonder that your time investment in some members isn't worth it well? And then how did you figure it out? Ankush.
Sure. Definitely, you will come across these situations when you are thinking whether am I investing my time in the right person. How do you figure out is basically, it depends on, I'd say, the person, whether they are open or not, right? So if there are situations that if you need to work through situations, if the person is open to feedback and coaching and growth, right? Yes, then definitely the investment is worth it. But if the person is not open, it's maybe too short of an answer, but direct answer, but like if they don't want to hear anything or don't want to change anything, it may not be the right place to invest your time in.
Thank you. Pal?
I might have a very naive answer here and with my limited manager experience, but I don't know that I feel like I feel like there's always a way to invest in somebody. It might take a different shape or a different form. It could be the case like don't do 5x investment in them if they're only able to invest in themselves 1x, like match their level of investment and then add a little bit more, right? You want to push somebody and grow somebody, but you can't make anybody do anything. So if you said like, I want to help you go from tech lead to manager and they have no interest in it, fine, don't push them. Instead, try to meet them where they are. If they're resistant to it, just try to figure out like, do they even like their job? Are they even happy doing what they're doing? And if not, help put them in a place where they are. Maybe they say, hey, I'm very content with where I'm at. I don't feel like growing. That's great. Invest your time into finding projects that are going to like secretly kind of grow them and challenge them a little bit without explicitly like forcing them to take on new things. I think there are just different ways that you can approach this to make somebody feel happy, fulfilled, or challenged at work. So find where that investment is necessary and apply it, and don't over apply it.
Thank you. Rahul.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what Paul and Ankush have already said. Not much to add, except that when you approach anybody, like sometimes when you feel that the investment is not being worth the effort and it starts frustrating you, like the only advice is that never let judgment creep in. Like always be curious whenever you're going into your conversations that, hey, if this person is not responding to what I'm saying, or then what could be the reason, and try to hear out their story, or try to help understand what's happening there, rather than create a judgment that, oh, this could be the reason why this is happening, and that's why. Like, so if you are curious all of the time going into your one-on-ones, I think you will unearth a lot of surprising information about individuals.
Thank you so much. Alrighty, we've finished all the questions, and thank you for asking those questions, because we also learn from answering those questions. That's kind of a detailed reflection, right? The technique mentioned many times today. And really, thank you to our panelists for your sharings, your insights and opinions. I personally had a lot of takeaways. Really looking forward to more inspiration from you in future events. And before all of us could drop off to enjoy the rest of your day, thank you then. That would be really great if you could provide us any feedback. Neil has already actually shared one message, but if possible, could please share it again. We do have a Google Form survey. If you can take 1 minute to answer it, that really help us deliver a better event for you. Alrighty, thank you.
Don't forget to follow us on Twitter as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you again for your engagement, for your participation. I have enjoyed my past 1.5 hours with all of you, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you again in the future events. Have a nice day for the rest of your day.